Good afternoon. It's Monday, December 16th, 2024. It is 1:30 p.m. and this is a special meeting of the Jefferson Public Utility District Board of Commissioners. My name is Jeff Randall. I'm president of the board and I'm calling this meeting to order. Jefferson PUD will be offering both virtual online meetings as well as in-person meetings unless advance notice is provided. Online participant audio will be muted upon entry. Please unmute at the appropriate time to speak. And if you're calling in, use *6 to mute and unmute and *9 to raise a hand to request to speak. So let's do a roll call. Jeff Randall, president of the board and commissioner for District 1.
Kenneth Collins, Commissioner, District 2.
Dan Tupper, Commissioner for District 3.
So I'm hearing kind of a weird echo. I don't know if that's because there's like people not here to, we're getting more bounce off the walls.
We were turning it up and we were having speaker problems.
Okay. Well, I guess people online, if you can hear us okay, that's what matters. And if you can't hear us okay, let us know. Okay, we're getting some thumbs up. Kevin just stepped out of the room for a second. And on the agenda, I wanted to pose a possible addition to the agenda. Here he is. So Kevin, we're at the agenda review. And today we've just got the one consultant team we're interviewing. Tomorrow we have two. I had spoken to you about adding an item to the agenda either today or tomorrow, and I'm wondering if we could add it today since we have less stuff on here.
That's a thing for Joel.
So
Special meeting, it wasn't posted.
Oh, that's right. So Joel, if we cannot add things to the agenda, can we?
Is it related to the topic that we're discussing?
It is, no. It would be review of it's the review of a public employee one.
So it would be an executive session.
An executive session for that purpose.
So we'll have to do that tomorrow.
Okay.
So we need 24 hours in advance notice.
I think it would take at most 15 minutes or 10 minutes or something.
That's what I was gonna ask at today's meeting. Could
Okay.
we schedule it at the end of tomorrow?
Tomorrow's meeting, and I was just going to look at the agenda for tomorrow.
I don't believe I have a.
Thanks everybody for bearing with us while we handle a little logistics here.
Yeah, I'm good.
You're good for that.
I can have 15 minutes.
Sure, let's do that. So then, and hopefully other stuff won't run us late tomorrow, but we're scheduled for 9 to 12 tomorrow and we'll just plan to, so then what do we, we have it on the agenda for tomorrow.
Well, Annette added it in the hopes that I could get it through this group today.
So we're good.
So we're good. We don't need to add it if it's on.
So I'll make a motion to accept today's agenda as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on today's agenda as presented. All in favor of the agenda, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. All right. Thank you, everybody, for bearing with us while we figured that all out. Okay, Kevin or Melanie, whoever's gonna kick us off.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Kevin. So we have our first executive search firm that the board will be interviewing today. Welcome Lee Taylor and Dave Luttrell. Thank you so much for being here today. We will have you present. At the end of your presentation, we'll reserve at least 30 minutes for questions from our Board of Commissioners. And I expect there'll be some questions along the way too. So if you both are ready, I will pass it along to you.
Sure. Thanks, Melanie, and thanks everyone for inviting us to be here today. Have you passed it along? Can I share my screen yet? That's going to be my technical challenge.
Huh.
I will try. Let's see what happens.
Shouldn't be any restrictions preventing you. Oh, we can see your screen now.
Okay. And I pulled it. Let me grab it from over. Gosh darn it. Let me. I'll stop sharing. I got to do it again, actually. Sorry. It's going to the other monitor and I don't want to do this with my head turned the entire time.
Take your time.
All right, what we got going on here? Okay. What does everyone see?
We
The
see
first page?
slide full screen. So you're
Great.
doing
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone. I have with me Dave Luttrell, who's part of our search team. And I can also see y'all's faces. So if you have questions during the time that either Dave and I are talking, just kind of shout them out for us.
And just want
So
hi Dave. Ken and I remember you from a few years ago when you interviewed for one of our GM positions. So it's nice.
Yes, and I wanted to say congratulations, Kevin, to my friend there. It's good that you're finally getting to the retirement ranks. So I can tell you this is a part-time role that I work with Lee on. So you will enjoy your time in retirement. So welcome to the other side.
I try to keep Dave plenty busy, but a lot of times he's out hiking too. So it's a good balance, I think. So I'm Lee Taylor. I lead the executive search team. I have over 23 years of working with cooperatives and public power, and then 18 years of working with public power and cooperatives, mostly from my time working at CoBank. We didn't do a lot of lending to public power, but just when I was leaving, given that Nebraska is a public power state, we started making an entrance into that state in terms of lending activity. When I left CoBank, I went to FCC Services, which is kind of like a baby version of NRECA in terms of providing benefits and insurance and consulting practices to the farm credit system. And that's when I started working with talent selection and assessment work. So natural segue for me, given my electric distribution experience and my want to get the right people in the right job. When this position came open, I joined the NRECA team, and I've been with NRECA almost 6 years. I don't do this alone. Most of the staff that we have, or not staff, but consultants that we have for the search team are former CEOs, such as Dave. Gene Brandt is actually a current board member at North Central Electric Co-op in Bottineau, North Dakota. And rounding out the team, we have Bob Matheny and Bobby Kilmer, also retired CEOs. Behind us, in terms of getting this work done for our membership, we have Delane Orendorf, who is the Director of Human Capital. She is a certified compensation expert, and part of our package is that we include a compensation analysis so the board can set a proper hiring range. Desiree Dunham works with me. She's actually in HR for NRECA, but she's a certified Hogan assessment consultant. So that's something that we also provide. I'll go into a little more detail around that, but she's also an analyst for us. Beth Ray works with Delane in terms of compensation, and Mikey Snyders is with our market research team. And the first part of our process, and I know the board did a good job of creating a list of things that y'all were interested in your next CEO. And we take that information along with an online survey that I'll talk about. And Mikey runs that survey from our market research team. So I want to take a step back, since it has been a while since Kevin was hired, and understand today's candidate environment overall from the membership perspective. So right now, out of over 1,100 GMs, CEOs, assistant GMs, and COOs, we have folks that are 62 and older. Between now and 2028, almost 43% of our executive leaders are eligible to retire. Knowing that a lot of them don't retire to at least 65, that number is still a large portion of our executive leadership across the country at 315 CEOs that would be eligible for retirement with age 65 and older. And also, we combine that with salaries overall are increasing for our CEOs, with last year being the highest increase of over 6% year over year. Sometimes that is because a longtime CEO has not had their salary kept up with. Within our world, sometimes CEOs say, well, you know what? I love what I do. Give me what you think is fair. And a lot of our organizations might not have a very structured performance management process. And that's what, when we hire new CEOs, that's what's leading to that great increase.
Hey, Lee, we got a question.
Yes. Thank you for seeing that.
When you talk about the environment today for CEOs, can you qualify a little bit what kind of CEOs you're talking about? Are you talking about across the board CEOs or in the utility industry?
Yeah, the NRECA membership.
It's referred to.
Yeah, the NRECA membership. And this is NRECA membership salary information as well.
Thank you.
So if a public power entity is not part of our membership, that's not represented in this data. However, this is also that amount of folks that are retiring and exiting any organization across the country. It has been occurring through that silver tsunami for the last 7 years, and it's still occurring. Does that help?
Yes, please continue.
Okay. So with that, our utilities, and really honestly, any organization is faced with the possibility of replacing employees with someone who's never held that job before. We have a great deal of strength in that second level of leadership, and with executives leaving, there has been an uneven preparation across the country within our membership in terms of giving folks the visibility to that next level. And with that salary increase trajectory, you can see that boards and hiring teams are also having to pay possibly more than they've ever paid before for that position. And a lot of our utilities see long time CEOs in that position or within another position within the utility. And given the increased mobility of other generations and the need for the want to grow careers more rapidly than we've seen, sometimes we're replacing employees with someone who might not stay as long as your previous employee. And so when you're taking a look at a CEO search, there are a couple things that are really needed to pay attention to, regardless if you go with a third-party recruiter or you try to do this on their own, which a lot of utilities do. But there are a couple things I want to go over before turning it over to Dave. There are a couple risks inherent in any search. One is making that wrong hire. And studies have shown across industries in America that if you make the wrong hire in a CEO level position, you have the possibility of paying up to 200% of that original person's salary in both indirect and direct cost. So the direct costs would be starting the search over again, litigation fees, possibly additional relocation fees, and those indirect costs are whenever there's disruption in that CEO chair, there can be anxiety and productivity can drop, especially if there's multiple changes. And so those are some risks inherent in doing any search. Sometimes along the way, there's reputational damage. It becomes harder to hire folks, and definitely that operational disruption. When we take a look at search, we want to do it in a very precise, deliberate, formalized process. And with that, it does take about 6 months from a contract being signed to when the new CEO sits in the new chair. And during this time, an additional risk could be there is some decision making that is delayed. And then it will take, regardless of experience of your next CEO, there will still be that ramp up needed in terms of experience. So that onboarding runway. When we do search, and what should be a consideration in any search process is paying attention to the competencies needed for success. And some of the information that Melanie gave me, that you're already starting to think about the competencies that are needed and the experience and the expertise that are needed. But we also take a look at the compensation side, and we provide expertise in that, and then also industry knowledge, and then critically cultural fit. So Dave, you want to jump in about walking everyone through the actual search process?
Certainly. Thank you, Lee. And a couple of things. First, again, I want to thank the commissioners for allowing me and Lee to be a part of this process. When Lee asked me to be a part, of the team that would do this search. I was really excited because, my friend Kevin there, I didn't want to call Kevin beforehand and congratulate him. I don't want to contaminate the process there, but I was really excited to hear the good news of his retirement and all the things that have gone on there. And that's really why Lee kind of started the presentation the way she did, talking about the difficulties in conducting an executive search. Kevin has accomplished, as I think the commissioners will acknowledge, some really wonderful things there in the last 8 or 7 years, whatever it's been since he moved up from the assistant general manager position to the general manager position. And he's going to leave some very big shoes to fill. And that's going to be a difficult process. Going into this, I think you understand that. You've been thinking about that right from the get-go. But the thing that I think NRECA can offer to Jefferson County PUD that the other consultants can't really offer, in my opinion, is a process that is summarized here in this slide that Lee has up before us. And we'll talk about these 4 steps in greater detail. But a process that has really been honed over 30 years. None of the other consultants have the track record. We've placed over 700 CEOs over that period of time that we do. And that process that we're going to talk about here today, you would think all consulting firms, search firms use kind of the same process. I think as you go through this next couple of days, you'll really realize there is big differences between how people carry out executive search processes. And I think the NRECA one is a format that you'll find really attractive and different. And it centers around these 4 main categories: the position understanding, the candidate generation, the candidate screening, and the final interviews. And so I don't have control of the screen. It's on Lee's computer, so I apologize. I'm going to have to kind of call on Lee to advance the screen when I need to. So Lee, if you'll go ahead and move that to the next step. So the first step.
Okay, you want it right there?
Yeah, one back.
There you go.
Is in fact the position understanding. And all of these steps, commissioners, are laid out in detail in the proposal that I know Lee sent in earlier in October. I think when you guys were first starting to think about this process. And so I'm not going to try and go through each one in great detail, but please ask questions as we go through the process. But again, the first is the position understanding. One of the key things I need to do as a consultant is really come in and understand the position and what it is you're trying to accomplish. And I want to compliment you. I've got before me the priorities that you guys have established for the next general manager. And I think you have done some really good work in thinking that through. But I think we can elaborate on that and build upon that. And there's a couple ways that I would do that as we get started. The first is some data research. I'll work with your key person that you might appoint, if it's Melanie or somebody else, to start gathering data about the co-op, about the position, things like the position description, policies on governance, policies on delegation of authority, organizational charts, things of that nature that will really help me start to understand the position there at Jefferson PUD. And later on, that same data will be shared with the candidates. Oh, you're going way too fast for me, Lee. Stay right there for a minute on that slide.
I'm trying to read your mind, but I'm doing
I'll call it
job.
out when I'm ready to move forward. So apologize for that to the commissioners. But it'll also be data that we share later on with the candidates so that they understand the position, they understand the issues that are going on, they understand the role and things of that nature. And we'll talk more about that part of it later. But early on, I really need to understand what you're trying to accomplish there. And gathering some of that data is very helpful in. The second part of this is what Lee has on the screen right now, the leadership profile questionnaire. And again, I know you as board members have been thinking about this for a little bit now, starting to think about what it is you think you need in the next general manager. And again, you've done some really good work here. But we'll take that another step further through this questionnaire. And the questionnaire is an anonymous questionnaire, and we'll send it both to the board members, each of you as commissioners, to get your viewpoints on things. And we'll also send it to the key staff, people like Melanie and Will, folks like that, Jimmy Scarbaugh, others, all of your key leadership. I would work with Kevin and Melanie to identify the key leadership that we want involved in the questionnaire. And the reason involving staff is important is twofold. You as commissioners, you have a view of the general manager looking from your table down towards the general manager position on how he's carrying out the instructions that you're giving him, the priorities that you're giving him, things of that nature. The staff is going to have a completely different perspective on the role of the general manager. They're going to see it from the perspective of how does that general manager's job interact with my job as administrative manager or as electric superintendent or as broadband manager, whatever it might be. They're going to have a completely different perspective. So it's important for us to get that perspective to really understand what we need, but also just as equally as important why we want to do this with staff is you as commissioners, I know this is important to you, you want the staff to be confident that you're carrying out the process, and you want them to trust what you're doing and to have confidence in the outcome. And the best way to develop trust or confidence is to ask people for input, get them involved in the process, let them have a say in the process. And so this is one of the mechanisms that allows them to feel like they're participating, and they are participating, not just feel like it, in the process, helps them to understand what is going on and to feel really confident that, at the end of the day, when we get to the end of this 5 to 6 month period, we're going to select the best person for this position. So the leadership profile, you can go to the next slide, Lee.
Hey, Dave, can you hold on 1 second? I got a question.
Yes.
So when you conduct those staff interviews, I'm kind of curious how you do it in order to get kind of the most candid information. Do you meet with people individually? Do you tell them that we're gathering the information, but your names will be kept confidential? I'm just kind of curious how you do that so you're getting the most candid, honest info and people aren't worried about saying what they really think.
Right, and that's a great question. So we actually don't do it through in-person meetings. We'll use it through a survey instrument that will be emailed out to each of them. We'll start the process very quickly if we were selected, identifying those individuals that we want to participate. We don't want to, you're I believe about a 78-person organization. We obviously can't interview or survey 78 individuals and analyze that much data. And the further you move away from the general manager, I don't want to say less relevant, but the less relevant the opinion might be of an apprentice lineman, for example, versus the administrative manager as it relates to the duties, functions of the general manager and what it is we're looking for in that general manager's position. So what we'll do is we'll start communicating via email once we have those people identified that, we will be conducting this survey. That'll be completely anonymous, that the board will receive the results of the survey in a summarized report, that all names no names are excluded or included in the data. And we really try to assure that point. I would also work with Kevin and Melanie, in that early part of the process to make sure they carry that same message to the employees, that it is a completely anonymous survey. And you're on exactly the right track. And I apologize, on my screen, I can't really see if there's questions. So interrupt me if anybody is trying to ask a question.
So this Commissioner Tupper, Dave, a little bit of clarity here, clarification, because we are a public entity and the Public Records Act is in play. Is this something that should go through our legal counsel if it's emails with the individual employees?
Well, I think it's always good to make sure legal counsel is on board with what we are doing here. But I can tell you this process has been used with districts before, not just cooperatives, but also with districts that are under public, open meeting law requirements, things of that nature. So we early in the process would probably want to inform him or her what we're doing, what it is we're communicating out to the employees and make sure that they don't see any issues. But in my feel, and Lee, please jump in here, if you have a different view. I don't think anything in here is going to be in violation of any of those type of public records information. I think it's all personnel related. And again, Melanie may also have some insight on this, and personnel related information is generally protected from disclosure. So I don't think it's a problem, but it's certainly one that we should run to ground early in the process.
Commissioners, I'm actually on the call. I'm general counsel to the PUD. My name's Joel Paisner. Nice to meet you both. And we'll be happy to work with you on setting up a process that works for everybody.
Okay, great. I do want to add one piece there, because there's 3 different stakeholder groups. You have the commissioners, exiting CEO, and staff. They are slightly different, but only the board will have the summaries. So I just wanted to add that piece.
So as Lee said, when it's done, it's all summarized. We prepare a report. Only the board will see that. But before we get to that, the other perspective that obviously is very important in this process is that of Kevin. He holds the position now. He's going to have a viewpoint as to what is needed in the next general manager. He obviously knows his strengths and his weaknesses as it relates to that position. And we're going to count on him to share that through the process. The leadership the leadership profile questionnaire has really got 2 parts to it. Lee's showing here on this screen the first part of it, which is the leadership competency model. It has these 5 subcategories. And what we're really trying to do here with the questions that fit into these categories is really assess what is needed in terms of the leadership. What is important? What kind of strengths and weaknesses or strengths are we looking for in terms of the leader? Because we're not hiring a subject matter expert here. You have a lot of subject matter experts that report to the general manager. What we're trying to hire here is an executive leader. And so these are the categories. The first part of the leadership profile questionnaire is broken down into. And then the second part of the questionnaire is actually where we get into questions related to things going on at Jefferson County PUD. What are the strengths there? What are the weaknesses there? What are the issues that the general manager should be focusing on when they first get on board? What are some of the long-term priorities that need to be addressed? Those type of questions. And in the survey, it provides ample opportunity for them to provide comments and written responses. And I think you as commissioners and Kevin as the outgoing general manager, even though he won't see those, but those are the most valuable inputs we'll really get out of that, because it really helps you understand how your staff sees where Jefferson County PUD is at today and how they think it can or should evolve under the next leadership. So it's a really, really valuable tool that we'll want to get started on right away. And again, hopefully we can work out all the details that make it fit within the district model there. So Leo, if we'll go to the next slide.
Dave, if I can interrupt, approximately for organization with 75 employees currently, how many surveys would you plan to send out?
Well, I was looking at your information that's publicly available, and right now, I'm going to count it real quick. I apologize. I have it right here: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Counting Kevin, there are 8 individuals that I would say, based on what information I have, fit into that key staff category. There may be a couple other sub-managers that are below that. That we might want to include, that, again, working with Melanie and Kevin, we try to identify, but typically you would probably not want to get more than about 12 to 14. Again, the data, I think, just starts to get a little watered down. And one of the things we also have to do when we look at especially the further down you go in an organization, sometimes employees will use this as an opportunity to just voice their grievances. And there's nothing wrong with that, but we have to kind of take that into consideration and kind of view it for what it's worth. And you generally don't get that so much at the key staff level, but sometimes when you go further into an organization, you do see that start to creep in. So I would say, the key staff, again, you've got about 8, and there may be 3 or 4 more below that we think is worth to send this out to. Okay. So that will be going on right away once we get started to really try to understand the position. The other thing that will get started right away is this slide shows is the compensation analysis. Lee kind of spoke to that a little bit. You know, we're not here to suggest or tell you what the salary should be for your next general manager. We just want to arm you with information. I know you are members of Milliman's Northwest Utility and Salary Survey, so I know you get some very good data already. That's a really great tool, and I know you guys are using that. But in addition, and I also have access to that, but in addition to that, what we'll do is we'll run our compensation analysis. We use some different databases. We use obviously the NRECA database that, you know, again, has access to the 850 plus member data that we have. We also use the Economic Research Institute database, and we also use the Comp Data Executive Compensation database. So we'll pull all that data together. We'll sort it out by utility size based on revenue, meters served, plant size, and of course regional and state relevant to you guys there in Washington. And then we'll sit down and we'll talk about that at the kickoff meeting along with the leadership profile questionnaire. We'll talk about all sorts of different issues. That's a very important meeting. We say 4 hours, and it usually takes 3 to 4 hours to work through all the things we're going to have to talk about, including the compensation analysis, residency requirements, relocation packages, all those kinds of things that need to be hashed out early in the process before we really start recruiting any folks for this position. And so, you know, that's really a key meeting. We'll maybe talk about that at the end of this presentation when we talk about the schedule. You know, the schedule is pretty flexible, but that is a meeting that, you know, with you guys, I know you're very busy. You also have some public meeting requirements that you have to meet. We'd want to get that scheduled and on the books as soon as possible. So we'll have the 4 hour kickoff meeting. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Lee. And at that, the outcome, what we're really wanting to do is to come out of that meeting with a couple of things. And the main thing we're going to come out of it with is what we'll call our master job posting. The master job posting is a document that really has a twofold purpose, if you will. It really will define what it is we're looking for in the next general manager, their leadership competencies, the knowledge, the skills that we're looking for. And we will use that, we NRECA, if selected, you know, to really help us screen candidates for this position. So that's one of its purposes. But the other equally important purpose of the master job posting is to really have a marketing piece, if you will, to sell Jefferson County PUD, to sell the Port Townsend area, to sell Jefferson County area to potential candidates to get them excited about this opportunity. So once we've completed the position understanding, we move into the next phase, the candidate generation. And the goal here isn't to identify or get 75 applicants for this position. What we're not looking for volume here. If we get a lot of applicants, that's really, really good. We're not going to turn any applicants down. What we're looking for here in the candidate generation phase is quality candidates, candidates that are going to fit the needs there at Jefferson County PUD. So Lee, go on to the next slide. And we're going to do that in a couple of ways. Now, this first way we're going to do it is obviously posting the position in a lot of different forums. In the proposal we sent to you, we identified a lot of the proposal, a lot of the places we'll post this, such as cooperative.com and in our magazine at LinkedIn, NWPPA, obviously a PPA, places like that. In addition, we'll work with some of the statewides around you, the cooperative statewides. Oregon and Montana both have career pages on their statewide websites. Washington does not, but we'll work with the Washington Association to send it out to their membership. We'll also work with some of the organizations you guys are involved with, such as the Washington County Public Utilities District Association, folks like that. And we'll also talk through other places we might want to post, as a group and make some decisions on that at the kickoff meeting. For example, maybe we want to put it in some of the newspapers in the Seattle metropolitan area or other places like that. So we'll work through that process, but any of the consultants you're going to talk to today and tomorrow, they're going to do the same thing. That's not what sets us apart from the other folks. They'll all develop a good job post for you, and they'll post it elsewhere for, as well, just as good as we can. I think what sets us apart that, hopefully you'll think about is our ability to network data or to utilize data. None of the folks you're going to talk to have access to the amount of data that we have on potential candidates. And we've accumulated that data, obviously, through 30 years of doing this process, but also the simple fact that we are a cooperative organization that serves our membership, and we have over 850 members. And those members are in pretty much every state of the United States. And, when you think about where districts are at, Washington, Oregon, California, Nevada, Arizona, Nebraska, those are the 5 main states that have districts similar in structure to yourself. We serve in all those states. We serve districts in all of those states. We have access to that data. And through this process, we'll be working that network. We will be sending out somewhere around 1,200 emails to potential candidates that we know of that are out there, just to kind of get that first level of general interest going. But then we'll be following up. I'll be working the telephone. I'll be working the email with those candidates that I already know of. I've already been talking to Lee since, she contacted me about the possibility of working on this assignment of a couple of individuals that I think might have the right characteristics and experiences that it would help there at Jefferson PUD. So we'll be leveraging all of that data. And that's the thing that, again, I think sets us a little bit apart from all the other folks that you might talk to. They might have a good regional presence. We have a good regional presence, but we also have a very big national footprint and a very robust database that we can draw upon to look for candidates. Next slide.
So Dave?
Yes.
Commissioner Tupper. So you've referenced the co-op footprint often throughout the process here. And you've also referenced, like the 5 or 6 Western states. But because we are a public entity guided under RCW 54, are you familiar with RCW 54? Have you guys dealt with that before? Have you read that yet? Or is that something you would wait to do?
So I have not read that. I'm not familiar with that. Lee, if you have, jump in here.
The structure of PUDs and how the manager responsibilities and the board responsibilities and that sort of thing function. So just something I want to put on your radar now as the process moves forward. I'll ask the same question of the other applicants. So just how much you guys are familiar with that particular thing that guides this particular utility and the other 27 PUDs in Washington.
Okay.
Yeah, again, Lee, if you want to comment on that, but I will just say that real recently we did a public utility district in California, and I realize, California is California and Washington is Washington, so I don't want to try to, suggest anything more than that. But, we had to deal with all of those same kinds of things. In law, in California, it is legislated in terms of various responsibilities of the general manager, of the commissioners, things of that nature. So I don't see as an issue there. Am I personally familiar with it? No, but I think, as we get into the process, again, we're talking about phase number 1, it's understanding the position, understanding Jefferson County PUD, that'll be, right where we're at, is trying to figure all that out.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with it either. But we have not done any CEO searches in the last 6 years that I've been there for public utilities in Washington State. We've done co-op searches in Washington and Oregon, but not public utility districts.
And again, please jump in, because I can't really tell when there's a question. So thank you for just speaking up. So this next slide that Lee has up here, oftentimes when we sit down and start working with boards, they want to talk a little bit about internal candidates. And as the slide does say, we hope they're internal candidates. And I'll just be frank with you. If they're not internal candidates, then there's a concern, and the concern, of course, is what are we doing to in regards to employee development. And if we are selected to help you with this executive search, one of the things I'll be talking a lot to you as commissioners about throughout the entire process is employee development. Making that a priority of your management staff, your general manager, things of that nature. So I hope there will be some internal candidates, but sometimes boards want to treat them a little bit differently than external candidates, and there's pros and cons. And again, one of the things, our process, we have a very good process, I think, but we can customize it to individual needs and preferences. And if there's a strong preference here, we can work with that. But our recommendation is not to give them a short list, get them onto an interview stage, guarantee them interviews, things of that nature. And there's several reasons for it. First, the amount of interviews we can conduct is going to be limited. And we'll talk a little bit about that, just because it is a very comprehensive interview process. And so if we are giving internal candidates a courtesy interview, we're probably not interviewing other folks that might be better qualified for the position. So, there's that issue to consider. And then it's also what do your consumers, what do your staff think about the selection that's made at the end of the day? We want them to understand, we have done a robust, comprehensive search, and we have selected the best candidate for the general manager at Jefferson PUD based on merit and not upon necessarily who they might know or not know. So for all those reasons, we're going to recommend to you guys that we treat internal candidates equally through the same process as that of an external candidate. Next slide. So once we kind of complete the candidate generation phase, and here's one, this is one part of the process that does take time. When we get to talking about schedule later on, I know, Kevin fortunately is not retiring till out in June. I don't know the exact date, if he's set that yet or not, but that certainly gives us a little bit of time to work with here. All very doable. And so, a lot of folks, when we say it takes 5 to 6 months to do this, they kind of want to try and shorten that up a little bit. I don't think we're under pressure to do that, but the one area we don't want to ever shorten up is the candidate generation. We usually try to run that for about 6 weeks to make sure, we've really got the word out, given candidates ample opportunity to consider the position, given me plenty of time to talk with those candidates about the position, all of those kinds of things. But coming out of the candidate generation phase, we move into the candidate screening phase. And these two actually really are going to overlap. We show them, sequentially, just for clear presentation. But we'll start the screening, basically on day one when the first resume comes into the portal. And go ahead and lead to the next slide. And so the real goal of the candidate screening, what we're trying to do is work behind the scenes before we meet with you as commissioners to really assess this pool of candidates, to really try to narrow our way down to, hopefully 8 to 10 candidates that we feel really meet what you're looking for there at Jefferson County PUD and your next general manager. And we're going to go through a pretty comprehensive process to do that. And it'll actually start not only with the phone interviews, but even before the phone interviews. We'll be sending out to candidates a series of questions, follow-up questions, questions about why they're interested in the position, questions about what they know about Jefferson County PUD and the issues facing the PUD, questions about your power supply. We do that for a lot of reasons, because we have the resume, we have their cover letter, but now we're really trying to really drill in to see if this person has really started to research Jefferson County PUD, if they really understand this, if they're really committed to this, if they're really serious candidates, all of those kinds of things, and it also starts to allow us to assess their communication skills, the writing communication skills, obviously something that's very important in a CEO or a general manager. In addition, We'll be conducting phone interviews of all the candidates behind the scenes. These are not short interviews. Mine usually take over an hour, sometimes an hour and a half to conduct the phone interviews. We'll go through, really try and delve into everything, because at the end of the day, and I'm jumping ahead here down to the screening with the board, what I'm going to try and do for you is basically come in at the screening meeting and tell you the story of this candidate to help you, understand who they are, what other folks think about them, what their background is, what their experiences are, what their leadership styles. So the whole goal is for me and the folks that will work with me doing the screening is to be able to really come in at the very end and give you that verbal report to sit there and talk through each of these candidates. So do that, I'll conduct those phone interviews. We'll do reference checks, and these aren't perfunctory reference checks. When I call and do a reference check, it's not, do you know this person? Are they a good person? Great, thank you, goodbye. We'll go into detailed questions, things like, have you seen this individual in a stressful situation with an angry customer? How did they handle that? Have you seen this individual, with a difficult employee? How did they handle this? Have you seen this individual in a public meeting where, the public was, really being aggressive? How did they handle it? Really to try and get those references to open up and not just say, oh yeah, Kevin Street's a good guy, you should hire him. And I can tell you, when you do a reference check properly, people will open up and then they'll start actually talking. And I've actually had this occur where at the end of a reference check, an individual that had been put down as the reference said, I don't think they really are ready to be a general manager yet. So if you do them correctly, they're not just perfunctory. And so we'll do that. We'll also give you the option, and we'll talk about this at the kickoff meeting, of a video interview, a short video interview. There's pros and cons of doing this. Basically what I'm talking about here is just where they, do a short video introducing themselves, answering a few questions, and giving a little background on themselves. And then we show that to you at the at the screening meeting. And we'll talk about it, and you may want to do that, you may not. Again, there are pros and cons with those little interviews. The con sometimes is you prejudge a candidate before you really get them in front of you with a detailed interview. So all of that flows down to the screening meeting with the board. Before that occurs, I'll put together what we call our screening notebooks. They're binders. They'll have all of the data. You'll have the data on all candidates. You will know who all the applicants are for this position, but we'll really focus in and provide a lot of information on those 8 or 10 that we think are the most qualified for the position. But it doesn't preclude you. And I always tell boards I work with, if you see somebody else, then, I didn't have them in those final 10 and you want to talk about them, we're going to sit there and we're going to talk about it and make sure we all are on the same page. And you'll get that screening meeting, that screening notebook. We're under pressure. There's a lot to put together there, but we try to get those out at least a week before the board meeting to give you ample opportunity to start going through them and reading them. And again, you probably have some open meeting requirements that we need to be aware of that we're going to have to kind of work through as we put that information together. Next slide.
Hey, Dave.
Yes.
Commissioner Tupper again. So what step of the process there, and maybe it happens during the references review that you do, background checks. How extensive of a background check do you run on these candidates, and when does that happen in the process?
Dave, can I go ahead and take that one?
Yeah, go ahead, Lee.
Okay. Thank you for bringing that up. In our proposal, I did say that we would run background and credit checks on the finalist candidates. We've been advised not to do that anymore, mostly because it's out of best practice in some states to run a background and credit check before someone is offered a position or before they're the selected candidate. I did talk to Melanie previously to this conversation today, and they have a pretty robust process as well at the district. But if it's necessary, we can still run that on a selected candidate. And so Melanie, do you want to jump in real quick on?
Yeah, just to speak to that a bit, we do have a system that we use for candidates coming into the PUD. We can run a standard background check, which is an 8-year history, and we can also run a credit check. I would partner with Joel on this for the candidate that's selected, but we do have the capability to do that here at the PUD.
And just to follow that, I mean, there are some laws and rules that apply to it, and we'll just make sure that we're following that process. So
Yeah, thanks to everybody for that clarification and how the process would work then.
And just to clarify too, our process is that we screen candidates that we've selected for the job and offered that job to. So once we've offered the job, then we do the screening. We don't actually do the screening beforehand. So I thought I'd just offer that up as well.
I have a question also, and I don't know if you're going to talk about that coming up, but the Hogan Leadership Assessment that you list in your description, I'm not familiar with that, and I haven't had a chance to look into it to see what's involved with it. I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit and how it's used. And kind of one of the questions I had is, how objective is it? Is it, them asking, "Are you a good listener?" Things like, how do you gather the information?
Yeah, actually, after this slide, I think it's going to come up to answer your question, and Lee will probably lead the discussion on that. So maybe, if you don't mind, Commissioner, I'll finish this slide because you led right into the one that's coming right up. If that's okay with you.
Good deal.
Okay, so coming out of the candidate screening meeting, the goal will be to identify 4 candidates for interviews. Now, sometimes we identify more than that, but the reason we kind of recommend or advise to try and narrow it down to 6 candidates for interviews is, again, our interview process, I think you'll find, is a little bit different than the other folks that you're going to be talking with. We have a very robust final interview process that basically encompasses 3 components. The 3 components essentially are going to be a reception that is typically the evening before their interview, then a formal presentation where they actually make an actual presentation to you as commissioners, and then finally a 3-hour interview, or following the presentation, an interview for the remainder of the 3-hour period of time. A lot of folks, they just conduct a couple-hour interview, and that's fine. But our process is a little bit more robust than that, and we find that is extremely helpful because it puts the candidate before you in a lot of different formats and forums, starting with the reception. That is kind of intended to be a more casual format, business casual attire. We usually have some hors d'oeuvres and some soft drinks or something like that to try and make it more of a social setting, because we want to see how that GM, and we also invite spouses to that if they're available, how that GM is going to perform in those social circles. I mean, they're going to have to do that as the general manager, as Kevin knows, and those can be uncomfortable, where you've got to go out and socialize with legislators or county commissioners or other folks, and they got to be able to step in and do that. So we get to kind of see them in that kind of forum through the reception that occurs the night before. And then we start them off with a formal presentation. And what I ask them to do is not regurgitate their resume. You already have their resume at this stage. What I ask them to do is to talk about what they would do as the general manager at Jefferson County PUD. They will get a lot of data before that. We'll have them sign a non-disclosure agreement so that we can share data with them to really educate them on Jefferson County. And I'll advise you, when we're right before that again, they may say some things that doesn't make sense to you because they don't really know yet. They're still learning. But we don't want them to just come in and give a generic presentation. We want them to come in and give a presentation tailored to Jefferson County PUD about what their thoughts are as the general manager there. And this gives you an opportunity to judge several things. One, how well they prepared. How well did they literally learn about Jefferson County when they have access to a lot of data about you? Did they really spend the time to prepare? That tells us something. It also gives you an opportunity to see them in that formal presentation mode, where they're standing up, giving a PowerPoint presentation, how nervous they are, how do they communicate, whatever it might be. And then from there, we'll go into the interview, and it is a comprehensive interview, again, going a couple hours. So between the candidate screening and the final interviews, we'll work out that interview plan and the interview schedule, work up the interview guidelines, all of the questions, those will be things I work on. I'll work with Melanie on the logistics, or whoever you might have identify as the point person there at Jefferson County for me to work with. And we'll do all that. And one other thing we'll be doing in there, which goes to the next slide and the question, we'll be doing the Hogan Leadership Assessment. So Lee, if you'll go to the next slide, and I'll let Lee carry this one.
Sure. Thanks, Dave. And thanks for the question on this, because I find a lot of recruiters don't take advantage of the data that assessments can provide. I've been certified as an analyst in the Hogan assessments for 8 years. And what I like about it is that it shows 3 parts of how an individual is perceived of acting in a work environment. This, like a lot of the assessments, are focused on the big 5 factor of personality traits. So extroversion, conscientiousness, agreeableness, neuroticism, and the ability to be open to experience. It's got 3 pieces, one of which a lot of other assessments don't use, and I'm certified in a few others, is this motives and values. So when we're looking for CEOs and GMs in public power, there is a different quality that we're looking for as opposed to, say, an IOU, because we're looking for someone that understands of being in service. And when we take a look at a person's motives and values, that is the type of culture that they want to live within, they want to work within, and that is what they're going to create for their organizations, whether it's consciously or subconsciously. So that's the first piece. The second piece is, of course, and so that's fit for organization. The second piece is going to be the strengths. If you're looking for someone that is strong in external leadership and can build relationships really quickly, we can pull that out given the results from the assessment. The third piece is something that commonly is seen as weakness, but it really is when we don't get to do what we do best. This is our possible behavior that can be observed. It's called derailers in this speak. So what happens is these 3 reports are generated separately, and you asked about subjectivity, and yes, there is some subjectivity in analyzing this data, because me or Desiree Dunham in HR will need to make these 3 reports talk to each other. So if I have, say, one report saying that this person really values their heads down time and they don't work well with others, we're going to layer that on top of maybe the strengths profile to see, okay, so if we're observing their strengths rather than their values, does the strengths align with the values of head down and not engaging in a teamwork, or do their strengths throw some additional emphasis on the characteristics that they show up with? Like, yes, they're very sociable, they have high level of interpersonal sensitivity, and they can build relationships really well. So yes, there is some subjectivity in our analysis, but the subjectivity is related to which characteristics are showing up higher versus lower in another report. And what we do with that information, we provide a summary report to the commissioners in about 5 to 7 days in advance of the finalist interview. So, questions around that?
Well, that was good. Kim, you had one.
Yeah. I realize that these kinds of instruments are widely used throughout the human resource community. Do you have any concerns about the validity of these instruments?
Not with this one. Hogan has been around since I think the mid-70s, has been used in over 100 countries. And there are 2 things we look for in an assessment process, assessment tool. Is it reliable? Is it going to consistently gauge what we ask it to gauge? In this case, the values, the strengths, and the derailers. And is it valid? Will it do so? Does it? I got myself confused. Sorry. Is it reliable? Is it going to consistently gauge? And is it valid? Is it going to give what we said we're looking for? So this tool is
can I
valid.
drill down on that? Pardon
I'm
me.
sorry?
Can I drill down on that when you talk about the validity? Because first of all, I have a social science background and I did a little bit of online research about this particular instrument and others. And the problem is that they don't have a lot of predictive value in terms of how well the person does on the job.
Okay. Okay. This is one piece of information that y'all will be getting before you make a decision for your new GM. It's meant to add additional color and context to those competencies that you said you were looking for, and how they could operate. It's like dating. You really don't know what you're going to get until you get married, and they might do the, unload the dishwasher wrong.
Boy,
But that's why we have 10 separate pieces of information for you. It's one big puzzle. The other piece around the Hogan, so we talk about reliability and validity. Hogan is reliable and valid for selection. If you know your Myers-Briggs, your ENTJ and INFP, that's not valid for selection, and we do not use that. It's got great, it's a great tool in other areas, but not for selection. If this is a concern for the board, we don't need to do it. But people have been using it, not just HR professionals, but recruiters and other folks trying to understand the teams and people they're working with for decades.
I wonder if Commissioner Collins could elaborate on when you say it's not predictive of I don't know if you said performance or if you could give a little
there's
more.
no real data supporting the relationship between the test results and how well the individual actually performs on the job. It is reliable. I mean, you test a person multiple times at different intervals, you're going to get more or less the same results. But the problem with all of these tests is that people are not static. And they often dichotomize people. You're either introverted or you're extroverted. Well, the thing is, people are more complex than that. Sometimes they're introverted, sometimes they're not. It depends on the situation. So
absolutely.
I'm not trying to trash the idea of using instruments.
Yeah.
I think it's important to understand that they really have a lot of limitations, and I think it's up to my fellow commissioners. I don't care whether you use it or not. I think maybe time could be more valuably spent in conversation with candidates, but I don't put a whole lot of weight on these kinds of questionnaires.
Yeah, and I appreciate Commissioner Collins's interest in looking into this a little deeper. I look at it, it's always going to be subjective is kind of what I'm hearing, and just how much would the commission individually weight it towards the decisions we would make on a candidate. So I'm open to any kind of tools that are out there. This is new to me. The whole process is new to me. So I'm sure that other applicants will probably have a similar or maybe something not similar process for maybe evaluating the same kind of traits within a candidate. So I'm open to keeping,
they're widely used. They're widely used.
Yes.
Take it with a pound of salt.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
And I guess the way I would look at it too, it's if there was a way to know what predictive success was, boy, that would be a nice test to have. We don't have that. But
especially when you're dating, right?
I like that analogy. You said, gee, you got to wait till you marry him. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's a tough test.
I will say, the data I have that is valid for selection, but the parameters are saying is this is only one piece of the puzzle. You should not make any determination on selection based on these results. And what it does, and maybe I failed to say this is someone's natural tendency that is generally set in those early years, the 4 to 5 years. The whole process is to extract how do we operate in a business environment, all our resumes, cover letters, written, questions, phone interviews, all of those performative pieces are meant to pull out how do I show up in these situations given my wiring? Because if we take a look at the need for extroversion, I would say 70% of our CEOs and GMs are introverted. But it's that ability to pull outside of our natural tendency to be successful, which is where the rubber hits the road. And I think we're saying the same thing. It's like, how can we guarantee that this person is going to be the right fit for everything we need? And yet, this is another piece of information.
Yeah. And I would just say that I don't have a problem with the information. I think it'll, it would tell us about some of the tendencies of the person. And I think as we go through this process, hopefully maybe we'll get some ideas about perhaps the kind of people that we think the organization might benefit from having. But ultimately, as you say, it's just one piece of information. It's not predictive of really anything. Okay.
Yeah. So
I think the conclusion is we have no problem if you're selected with that being a part of the process. And of course, if you're selected, we'd talk more about how the process is going to work too.
Don, did you have?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. So it's my assumption that you would use this tool in conjunction with reviewing other core competencies and other successes that the person has had to get a feel for the entire picture. This is one element of looking at a series of core competencies and skill sets that you would add to that group. To Ken's point, I think by itself it probably wouldn't be as much value if you didn't look at the rest of the picture.
Yeah. Absolutely, and thank you for that. And David's sort of gone through the steps we take at the sort of the end stage before the interviews. And to go back to before we get to this last stage, the board will have this much information. And that's really intentional because we are, as we were saying, multifaceted. And this process is meant to see people from the different perspectives. And as you get more information, your first choice should and generally does change. Because as you get more information, you should change your perspective. So moving on, here is an estimated schedule. This is, as we were saying before, this is flexible. This is based on y'all's availability and the need for the process. But it generally does take 6 months from the start of the process to the when the CEO, the new GM starts. Oh, and this part also around finalist logistics, we handle that for the utility. We pay, we work with the candidates on, timing of the schedule, where they're going to stay, because one of our big pieces is confidentiality. And we, the public power world and the co-op world, we know a lot of people, and we do not want a candidate to run across each other and have their career aspirations balloon. We also don't want anyone with inside of this process to say, hey, I heard so-and-so applied. And then that person, because they're trying to grow their career, has just gotten their career destroyed. Our want to protect the process and the candidates in the process is very strong, and we will discuss that at every meeting.
Okay.
So as we discussed before, or through the proposal, the professional fee is 25% of the first year's compensation. That is typically salary only. We don't see a lot of signing bonuses on the distribution level at this point. Average expenses, that's mostly driven by travel costs. We try to give enough time between the screening meeting and the final interviews so folks are not making last minute very expensive flights. But for y'all, given your location, it might just stretch a little bit because of car rental prices or whatnot. So you'll see here that this 6,500 to 8,500 is also reflected by doing the background and credit checks. We would remove that. So that usually runs around $1,100 for each search. So this is actually a little bit on the high side. So we work, while it's our best intention and to our advantage to have strong relationships with potential candidates, we work for y'all. We want to make sure that we find the right qualifications and fit for Jeff Pudd, and we want to make sure that all candidates are treated equally and the whole process is treated confidentially. So we're not done after the offer letter is signed, and neither are you guys. We also include a post-search consulting option that we see that as a way to continue the success. So it's not like, oh, great, you've selected your person, now we're done. During that first year, we want to be able to support y'all in that transition, whether that is a consulting process for the new GM, whether it's coaching or applying a 360-degree assessment at the end of their first year, or for if there is some leadership team work, we can come in and do a conquering conflict workshop, or how to grow higher performing teams. Or we can also take the compensation work a step down. Or if there's work that needs to be done on the board, we can help with that as well.
I just want to chime in on that. Can you go back to the last slide?
Sure.
I think that's really an interesting opportunity to not just to be helping us with our GM search, but to what extent NRECA could help us. Because, one of the things we might have some internal candidates apply. If say, for example, someone is an internal candidate, they applied, they weren't accepted, they probably would have questions about, well, why not? And I think, or if we don't have any internal candidates apply, as Dave said, another question is, why not? Helping us maybe look at the folks just below the GM level and what resources does NRECA have to help us assess and support them in being successful. And it's not a secret, we lost our assistant GM. So that was the person who probably most likely would have gotten position. So I think there's some unique things about us that perhaps you could help with too.
And thank you. And I mean, this all stems from us being your not-for-profit trade association. We need y'all to be successful. We need all of our members to be successful and create a sustainable industry. And so that's where this comes from. And we're grateful to have the consulting bench to bring this to y'all. These are just a couple of searches that we've done over the last couple of years. You're welcome to talk to any of these folks if you need to. I mean, I could facilitate that if there's someone in particular you would like to visit with. And so, the bottom line is, oh, I'm sorry. Do we have a question, Joel?
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Lee, but I did, and I think you've covered this, but I just wanted to make sure to ask it. And I think Commissioner Tupper sort of touched on it as well, but I think we all appreciate what Enrica does. But I'm just wondering if and this is a particular question for you all. I mean, there is a different retirement program that Enrica is part of. And I'm just wondering if you run into reluctance on your candidates and your candidate pool to leave that retirement program, or are there strategies to address that? Just the concern that co-ops are similar, they're nonprofit, but they are different, and it's a different group that works there.
So are you saying specifically our RS deferred benefit plan in terms when you say
just
retirement plan?
overall, I'm familiar, and I have clients who are both. And I just know that the retirement system that Enrica puts together is much different.
With regard to the pension?
And for pensions.
Okay, so y'all have your separate pension.
Yeah.
So
thank you. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yes, and Melanie and I talked a little bit about that really early on. One of the things, our sister company is Homestead Funds, And one of the things that we've encountered, because not all of our members have that defined benefit plan anymore. However, there are some investment opportunities to kind of offset that loss of pension. And here's the thing, we don't know who wants to join Jeff Pudd, and we don't know the reasons. And there is great possibility that someone from a co-op that doesn't have a pension would be interested. Or if they do, they could run the numbers and say they're still interested because they could have a personal factor for moving out there. It could be someone from, one of the large munis and IOUs. It would make that transition as well. But it's not impossible. And we have seen some successes, absolutely, in terms of moving towards, I'm not even going to say co-op versus PUD, but moving to utilities that are not in that pension plan.
And if I could maybe add, Joel, and you know this, your current general manager went from a district to a co-op to a district, and has performed pretty well. So the track record is right there in your own district of a person that made that transition 3 times.
Fair enough, Dave, you're right.
So, why choose? I'm sorry, is there another question?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. No?
I want to ask each of you, how many searches would you say you've done in the last 4 years that you've been directly involved with?
Well, over 6 years, we've placed over 100 CEOs and senior staff.
I'm asking you.
Right. I'm sorry. I just want to preface, sorry. For me, since I lead the team and I'm the only employee, I do take the lion's share of that. And so I probably run 5 to 7 searches a year. Maybe more than that if I'm mathing it out correctly. Dave is a relatively new addition to our team. So Dave, talk about your searches.
Yeah, so I've been working with Lee for under 2 years. It'll be 2 years in February or March. And in that time, I've worked on or assisted on 5 searches.
Thank you.
One of them was a staff level search, and the others were CEO searches.
So thank you. I'm sorry I interrupted. Just to close out, we've been doing this for over 30 years. And we have that extensive national network. Not only do we have our databases that have particular candidates, I've worked extensively with the Northwest from my co-bank time, and then also from working here at NRACA. We have Dave that is connected to the Western United States and the public power world. And so we also work really well together in terms of sharing information among the consulting team in terms of other candidates that we've seen, with their pluses and minuses and where their alignment might be with Jeff Pudd. We offer a 6-month guarantee. We do provide that up-to-date compensation guidance, with a lot of the other recruiters cannot do because they don't have that expertise on staff. We include those virtual screening interviews if y'all are interested. And of course, that post-search consulting service. And if y'all are interested, the Hogan assessments.
And one thing, if I could jump in real quickly, that I should have said when I was talking earlier, but throughout the entire process, if I'm, your search consultant working with you, you'll be getting regular updates from me throughout the entire process. You won't be in the dark. Obviously we have the meetings that we talked about, the in-person meetings where I'll be there with you folks. But in addition, I won't say on a weekly basis, because there can be a period of time where there's some slow activity. It might not be weekly, but when activity is heavy, generally I try to put out a report every Friday, giving you an update on, while we're in the generation phase, for example, how many applicants have come in that week, things of that nature, just keeping you involved in the loop. In addition, throughout the process, I know you have a very capable staff there at Jefferson, but I'm available to assist. It's very important that you keep the staff informed of what is going on. And generally that should come from President Randall, as the head of the board instead of Kevin or Melanie. So typically, I've been asked to write draft memos that then can be, if President Randall wants to change, that's fine, that he can send out to the employees, just kind of giving them updates of where the process is at. I think it's important to keep staff engaged, because if you don't, they're going to start filling in the blanks with their own, assessment of what is going on. And also it can help with any press releases. I'm sure have a very competent communicator there that can put together press releases, but he or she may not have all of the data that I have in terms of trying to put some press releases together, and certainly can help with that regard as well.
Thank you, Dave. Yeah, I mean, and that just underscores what I want to say. We're there to support y'all in terms of making your best decisions, whether that's holding the logistics, screening the candidates, or working with you and facilitating the interviews. This is y'all's decision, and it's one of the most important decisions you make, but we're there to help guide y'all through that process.
Okay, and actually when I saw my name on there that I was going to be the point person, it made me kind of think that's not normally how we do things, but at the same time, I think what I'm hearing you say is it's really important how you communicate with staff as we're going through this process. And I would say that would probably be a discussion, the board would have as we go through this process, and we'd all want to be on board with what was being communicated. But yeah, I appreciate your attention to that part of the process. That's important.
And for us, our practice is whenever we're communicating with staff, either the chair or the entire commission gets copied on it.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, that's
This
an easy part of our practice.
And to follow up on that point, makes the point of general counsel was correct. Part of the reason I brought up RCW 54 to your attention, so that you're aware moving forward about how the processes work for us internally and externally, not only within the industry. So again, that's something I think is going to be detrimental to the size of the pool you may be able to generate. So it's really important that everybody at your end, everybody on the candidate pool understands that RCW and the rules we have to play by.
Thank you.
Well, and maybe it could even be, and I don't know if it's already been thought of, kind of a fact sheet about PUDs, because you might get candidates that they just don't even know what it is. Just something kind of quickly outlining what is a PUD, how does it work, so they can say, oh, okay, this is all really similar to what I'm used to. This is a little bit different, but okay, I get it.
And in the bigger picture, I that's a great idea, but I think this also could show some initiative by the candidates to do their research, do their homework. So I don't know at what point I would say, here's the list of things you should look at. I would maybe, the timing would matter on something like that to me. I'd like to see them organically come to the conclusion that this is a PUD, it's not a co-op or a municipal or whatever, and they would take some initiative on their own. So again, I would leave that up to whatever consultant eventually firm we go with. And again, this is a conversation I plan on having with everybody.
Oh yeah.
So
and I think that's a really great place for our written questions that we do before a phone interview, is to say, tell us what you know about PUDs and how they operate, and vis-a-vis other structures of electric utilities.
And you also mentioned it early on, you review a lot of the things we have. We have a governance policy. It's about 20 pages long. So, there again, due diligence, I would think the candidates would be looking at our website, and that information is available about, how it is set up to govern. And a lot of that comes out of that RCW as to how we set up our governance policy.
I guess on top of that, I'm a little worried about getting enough qualified candidates. So I'd probably lean on the side of, don't make it an Easter egg hunt. Don't make them go find it, offer it, offer some information so that it's, people are busy, make it relatively accessible. But then at the same time, if they haven't reviewed it, or if they read it and it's strange and there's citations of where they can go find out more, they go find out enough so that they're comfortable and they can answer questions and make us comfortable that they can handle the organization and the structure and how it's different maybe from things they've been involved with in the past. So yeah, good questions, good points, good discussion. All right.
one thing that Dave mentioned briefly is that the finalist candidates will get access after they sign a confidentiality agreement to a Dropbox. And so that Dropbox is meant to give enough information so the candidates are well prepared for their interview. So we don't spend time, discussing what's the difference of a PUD versus a co-op. They should definitely have that information before they make it to the finalist stage, but it also could live in a place like the Dropbox.
Right. Resource. Cool.
Mhm.
All right. Is that it? Looks like
Well,
that's it.
I
ahead.
appreciate y'all's time and thanks for inviting us and all the great questions. And given our vested interest in helping, our members grow and be sustainable, we would love the opportunity to work with y'all.
Okay. Do we have any additional questions?
Thank you very much for your time and all of the information that you've shared.
Does staff president or Dawn or Joel have any additional questions? Not seeing any.
Just
Do we
want to
have-
say thank you too.
I don't think we have any members of the public on board. We weren't really planning to take
There were a
public
couple,
input on this,
yeah.
but
Yeah.
you can always reach out to a PUD commissioner if you have thoughts. I don't know if we wanted to elevate the public to the board level in these meetings, but if folks have thoughts, they can certainly approach us and let us know.
Yeah, I'd say thank you. Great presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Really,
Bye-bye.
I think we really appreciate being NRECA members, and
Mhm.
I'd like to see us continue to take advantage of the programs that you have, because even though the governance structure is a little different, the resources available to staff is super valuable and relevant. And we have pulled people from the co-op ranks and they've been great folks. And I think there's a lot of crossover DNA that's super helpful for us.
I absolutely agree. And you guys are blessed with having NWPPA out there. And really that cross-pollination of their training and all the events. I think you might get more candidates than you think, given that people are more aware of public power from the co-op world in the Pacific Northwest and the rest of the country is.
Okay. Sounds good. And then everything we're doing, it's a lot harder than it used to be because things aren't staying the same. Both Kevin and Dave know that. The energy world and broadband and everything else, it's like we've gone to this warp speed change. So we all need to work together to navigate those things.
Mhm.
Thank you
Absolutely.
so much for your time and interest in this.
All right. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I had a question for Joel and Melanie, and when we get to the point where we're deliberating, I don't know if we're going to do any of that now. Is that something that we're going to do in the open public meetings on the selection of the search firms?
That is my understanding. Joel, do you want to jump in here? He's
Sure.
shaking his head.
Yes, this
Okay.
is a,
Deliberating and discussing and
yep.
in open session. We just lost Ken for a second. I want to wait for him to get back to see if we want to do any discussion now or just kind of hold it until we've heard
Just
from all three.
Curious, when do we post our meeting video and audio online? I mean, will the other applicants have a chance to see what happened here today or before we interview tomorrow?
With Will gone, but usually he posts.
I was gonna say, or should we hold off? That was kind of where I was headed. Should we hold off?
Normally Will Stewart.
We're not obligated to post it in any particular time other than a reasonable time, and it'd be at your discretion how you want.
We could just decide to wait to post them all.
I think you can.
Nobody has any, that would be some serious deep research. Go see what the other guys presented.
Yeah. Still, just to give everybody a
They
out
come
the
in
gate
and say,
open.
oh, the Hogan, it's just a complete bunch of hogwash. You got to go with ours. Yeah. Let's get Ken to come back.
So
let me just get Ken up to speed. So Ken, while you were out, we just asked if the deliberation and questions that we have on the consultants, if that will be handled during open session or closed, it will be handled during open session.
Yeah.
I just wanted to
Yeah.
give and then we also discussed, since we've got now a video of the meeting of the first consultants, we should probably wait and post those until after the second one. So everybody's working from the same playbook. Do either of you want to have any discussion or questions at this time, or do we want to hold it until after?
I guess I would ask staff that was involved, some of the stuff they heard today, one of the things that jumped out at me with this particular presentation, we've talked about surveys of staff survey, and we have the, what's the term, transition group. I know what'll come up at the other interviews. Is this something that is on board with what we're thinking between staff about the number of people involved in that part of the process?
Maybe, yeah, I think this would be a great chance for you to tell us a little bit more
Yeah.
about what's happening and how
What did
does
you
that-
guys learn today? What did you hear today that maybe is not what everybody, so we're all on the same page of what our expectations are
Yeah.
for this group, whatever group it ends up being.
the whole process, because we've got an internal staff process. Now we've heard about, how one consultant would handle it.
But we're talking two different things. Our process is a smooth transition. So we're looking at things a little bit different than they are. They're looking at hiring, the best fit for our utility. So we're working in parallel, but it is a different path.
So is it, Kevin, so then is what you're talking about is how do we prepare staff for a transition to whomever is selected? Is that kind of the idea?
How to get staff all working together so that there's a successful transition for both the new GM and existing staff.
Okay.
So if we can use a little bit of time now to share our impressions of this group.
Would you like to go first?
No.
Dan, do you want to go first?
Well, again, like I said, this is a new process for
and,
me.
and I would say we're not limited if we can.
Well,
add
Joel,
later.
Joel can jump in if he sees something heading off the tracks here.
No, I mean, there's nothing off the track here. I mean, this is, the biggest concern would be if this was going on in executive session. It's not, it's public.
So
It's your process.
yeah, what I see as this process plays out with these interviews is, how are they going to separate each other, to where we know we're getting on par, that each one is going to head down the paths we need them to head down, which I think we accomplished most of that today. I don't know if we missed anything or not. I know Melanie had to jump in with a few things that she had discussed with them. And obviously Joel put himself out there as a resource for them as well. So at this point, it's hard for me to give any feedback other than like I said, I thought it was a good interview or presentation, whatever term you want to use. But what is it that I don't know that I don't know? Until I hear another firm, maybe there's something else they're going to bring up. I am somewhat, concern's not the right word, but I'm interested in the pool that they're all going to be able to draw on. Who has an advantage there or doesn't have an advantage there? How do we know that? How do we do our due diligence to see that what they're potentially promising for the pool that they have access to isn't just the same pool that somebody else does?
Sure.
I don't know.
Why would it be different?
I don't know. That's
Different.
I'm curious.
Yeah.
So
I have a question for staff. So NRACA just listed off, here's who we've found people for. Is it useful, or are we going to reach out to any of those organizations to say, hey, you hired somebody, how did that go? I don't know if that's useful or not useful, kind of as a reference check.
I think you should do that.
Now we say who's going to do it?
Well, you should direct staff to put,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
a
you.
report together for
Yeah.
that. That's important.
Yeah. I mean,
Yes,
one
indeed.
of them was Inland Power out of Spokane. I tried to look them up quickly. I don't know them. I guess they're a co-op. I don't know. It said something about hydropower. I don't. What do you?
Inland Power is the biggest co-op in the state of Washington.
Okay.
They did just within the last 2 to 3 years, maybe 4 years now, just hired their CEO through NRACA
Okay.
executive search.
And they're not a PUD, but still it would be probably interesting to reach out to them. So I guess we would be interested in that before we make a decision on
Yes.
who we're hiring, what we've heard from folks they've worked with.
I think that would be valuable and I'm happy to help.
Okay. So I think it wouldn't just be help. I think it would be do it, because I don't think the three of us are going to do it.
well, the one.
I would want, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. No, go.
I would want to know who worked primarily with Inland Power. I got the feeling that Lee has a lot more experience than Dave.
Dave's new. Yeah.
Dave's new and been there, done that in terms of search firms.
They've lost, I don't know who did theirs, but I know they have lost some of their executive search team, people that have done stuff in the past.
In our ECA.
Yeah.
Just because they're finally, a lot of them are retired
Retiring
CEOs
thing, yeah.
and GMs, and they finally say, okay, it's time to be completely done.
Well, didn't they have a screen up there too of a bunch of other, maybe I've been reading all these things recently. Now I can't remember whose head was on whose paperwork. Did they list a bunch of other guys that they had who were, I thought they did.
Showed a couple today.
Yeah, that they had these other executives who are involved with them. And I guess another, question if we follow up is, okay, are any of them going to be involved in this, or is it Dave and Lee?
I had the impression it was a group of about 6 or 7
I think
people that they would utilize in some way, shape, or form, but that Lee would be the lead was the way I heard it.
So my understanding is Dave would be the lead.
Oh, okay.
The co-lead. So would be both Lee and Dave, and then they would pull in those other contacts for specific parts of the process.
Yeah,
Like the survey,
Right.
screening
Money.
candidates.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that was my impression.
Okay.
One thing we didn't get in today, and again, I'm not that familiar with all the co-ops. I know they do broadband, I know they do energy, but it's our water component too that we have to take into account into how prepared each of these groups or these firms will be with being able to have access to people who actually have water background too. I don't know in the cooperative side of things if they do much water in the co-op world or not, so.
Some do natural gas. There's a little mix, but primarily it's electric centric.
Well, I guess I'll just speak for myself. I thought it was helpful to have the interview in addition to the materials they provided, because as I read through the materials, both them and one of the other groups, to me, it felt like support for how Melanie would normally run the process is kind of what I was seeing on paper. But when I heard them talk about what they do, I felt like, okay, there's more to it than that. Yeah, it's going to be interesting how we reach a decision on this, but we're just down with one so far. But I am glad that we've chosen this route as opposed to just saying, hey, Melanie, go forth and try and do the best you can. And we'll see what we come up with. It just feels like it's such an important decision and time is short, and that this is probably this route is probably our best shot to get the best candidates.
That was the one other question I had, was the timeline they put up there. I would assume is doable for us, barring any hiccups. Is it quick enough? I mean, should we think we should be more aggressive or not than what was posted up there today? Or can we be?
Well, I
I
think
guess that's probably a question more to staff than to us.
I think their advice is don't rush it, because you want to take the time to get the word out and to answer questions. Because they kind of hinted at that. Yeah, you can try and go faster, but the sense I got from that is that may not, if that was the best route, that's what they'd be advising. They're advising more of a route that fits within our.
Well, it looked to me, again, we have the process of making a determination which firm to go with, but it looked like the kickoff meeting was where you would pretty much get everything kind of nailed down, and then they would go from there. So I guess it would be whether or not any of the others have a much later date for that to take place. I guess that's what I would watch when I watch the other applicants, is what kind of a timeline. Because once you have that meeting, we should be able to put everything forward, to them. I would think of how we want this thing to go and the qualifications that we're talking about, and those sorts of things, to where we can be up and going and not get any of a later start than what I saw today. So that timeline looked acceptable and reasonable to me, but I'm curious to see what the other entities have to say. That kickoff meeting looked to be the key, the 4-hour one.
So for me, the bottom line is the bottom line. If we're going to spend $50,000 to $60,000 on a search firm, I want to have confidence that we're using experienced people who are going to work hard for us.
Mhm.
Don has his hand raised.
Hey, Don.
I just want to kind of talk about some of Ken's comments here. Yeah, I think it's really important. I think the presentation was a good one. I like the post selection possibilities that are there for additional help. But I think we got to know for sure what kind of people are going to be working on this, their experience background, and how much they've actually accomplished at the consulting firm. So we know exactly what we're getting. So maybe some additional inquiries about how much time are they going to spend on this? Who are they? What are they going to be doing before we make the final selection?
If I can add to that, Don, I think comparing this group with the other two groups with those questions in mind will help, illuminate for us what our choices are.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Well, do we have any other business to conduct today?
If you don't mind.
Go ahead.
So the next step in this will be board deliberations. What I'm hearing from the board is that you'd like me to reach out to some of the contacts that have used NRECA executive search. I'm assuming the other two recruiters as well.
Right.
So there'll be a little bit of time in there so that I can conduct these interviews. So after the recruiters all present, the board will have to deliberate and come to a decision about who you're selecting. And I think it would be helpful to get a date on the calendar
Sure.
for that, with how busy the holidays are.
Right.
The new year already.
So, so how much time do you think you'll need to get some info from some of these other organizations? Let's work backwards from that.
I would say 2 weeks.
Okay. So 2 weeks today puts us into,
Even with the holidays, because it's not only our schedule reaching out to some
Yeah.
of the companies, it's like inland and.
can we wait until the, second week of January to do this, or what are we thinking?
So we can wait until that second week of January. I'm picturing that slide from NRECA in the timeline.
Yeah.
And so that pushes out the timeline a little bit for them or any recruiter that we pick, but.
Well, could we schedule a meeting maybe sooner? And if Melanie can reach out to these other companies, then we could do it.
Okay. Week of, so then maybe towards, I guess,
Week of the 6th.
Can we do a special?
well, that is that's the second week.
Of January.
I like
Do it at like 3:00.
3 o'clock meeting on the 7th. Good idea,
Because
Mike.
we already have a BOC. That's our first BOC meeting of the
Okay.
year. It's January 7th. So let's just set it.
Is it?
Yep.
That should then get us through the holidays, and I like that. Just make it at 3:00. I mean, unless you guys think you need more time to deliberate.
No.
No,
I don't
like I
think-
said,
don't
that's
think we'll-
already pushing what I've already said. I like the timeline I saw today, and the more we tack on here, the further it pushes it out. And January and February is just going to be crazy. So the more we get done earlier, the better.
Okay.
I'm not trying to rush anything. I'm just saying, the more efficient we can be up front, the better.
Okay.
Commissioners, one thought is that while Melanie will do her level best to get the contacts to the various references, you could, after tomorrow, and this is something you could reserve for discussion tomorrow, after you've interviewed everybody, just say, you could always say subject to checking your references so that the reference discussion doesn't get in the way of the discussion about who you're interested in. And it may be key, and then you'll just have to wait. But, I think maybe you could think about this in the next day, listen to the next 2 interviews, and then try and figure out the process. Meanwhile, as Mike suggested, we should probably hold that time on the 7th, but there may be an opportunity to do it sooner, because I think it's true that the time there's a time crunch here. And so just a thought.
Sure.
Well,
And
Mel-
I was just going to suggest if we do it on the 7th, instead of making it 3, could we make it 2:30? Because it just seems like an hour just goes like that.
Yeah.
Would that be okay with folks?
Yes.
2:30 on the 7th, if we have that date. Okay. Who is next? Dawn?
Yeah, so Melanie, when you make these inquiries, maybe you could ask who they work with and any recommendations on how to improve the process that they would make if they're going to start it over again.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you, Dawn.
You're welcome.
Anything else? All right.
And then tomorrow we're at 9.
Yeah.
Yes.
9 to noon.
Make sure I had
Yeah.
that right.
So I think we've completed our agenda. My computer is shut off again. Somebody with their agenda open?
Yeah, it was
Are we
just
done?
the
Okay. So it is now 3:15. We have completed our work. So we are now adjourned. Thanks, everybody. See you tomorrow.
Thank you.
See you tomorrow.
Commissioners.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
You're welcome.